Welcome to today's webinar, Maximizing the ROI of Website Traffic by Reducing Visitor Anxiety, sponsored by VeriSign. My name is Justin Brightigan. I'm with Marketing Sherpa, and I'll be hosting today's webinar. We have some housekeeping information and some introductions before we begin. Now, our presenter for today's webinar have many years of marketing experience and have spoken to thousands of marketers over the years. They've even wrote books, and they are truly the thought leaders in optimization, so we're very pleased to have them here with us. I really encourage you to pay attention to what they have to say. The first is Boris Greencott. He's the Associate Director of Product Development at Marketing Sherpa and MechLab's primary research. He has led optimization projects, each generating tens of millions of dollars. He shifted his focus recently to help us write the 2011 LPO benchmark report, which was actually released yesterday. Congratulations on that, Boris. And he continues to contribute to our various blogs and webinars, as well as teach the LPO workshop across the country. We're also very pleased to have Carlos Chang with us. He is the Senior Product Marketing Manager at VeriSign Authentication Services. He is a Silicon Valley veteran marketer and technology junkie. I guess we all are, Carlos, with the experience of developing and marketing at startups and large enterprises. Now, Carlos's latest passion is wearing a white hat in product marketing with VeriSign authentication team, now part of Symantec, to help develop and promote solutions that companies bring trust, safety, and security to the World Wide Web. So we're very pleased to have these wonderful speakers with us. We'd like to encourage you to join the conversation today on Twitter at #SherpaWebinar. And also, as a reminder, you can use the GoToWebinar question box feature to ask your questions. Now, do keep in mind that we'll have about 10 minutes of Q&A session after the presentation has concluded. And if by chance, we don't expect it, but if you do have technical issues, feel free to report them in the question box that we have there for you. Now, a question I get asked a lot is, will this presentation be available? Yes. We will be recording this presentation, and we will send it to you in an email tomorrow. Now, Boris, I'm excited to hear what you have to say about optimization. I know that over the past year, you've been working on this LPO book. I'm actually really eager to hear about some of your findings. Now, you've been deep in the marketing trenches for a while on this data. Can you give the audience a little insight on how this all came about?
Sure. Thanks, Justin. Not quite a year, but it's been quite a while working on this benchmark study. Before Marketing Sherpa gave me an opportunity to lead this report, I spent 3.5 years at our sister company, MarketingExperiments, with which some of the audience might be familiar. If they're not, this might get a little confusing because I'll be looking at a MarketingExperiments case study later on and kind of go back and forth. In any case, at MarketingExperiments, I was working on applied research projects with major enterprises. These clients include, just off the top of my head, a couple of household names like Bank of America, 1-800-Flowers, Johnson & Johnson, and so on. And we provided these companies with optimization services using an empirically developed optimization methodology, combined also with your standard scientific method for testing. And getting involved in this benchmark study was really a great opportunity for me to use what I had learned about the challenges that other marketers face every day as we work together with them on these major projects, and about the questions and the needs of kind of real-time, in-the-field marketing operations. So in this webinar today, I'm going to touch briefly on several of these topics, but primarily we'll focus on LPO tactics to give the audience kind of some concrete things to take away from this webinar. Within the time that I have, we can't really cover these major broad topics that you see on the screen and nowhere near their entirety, but I will pull out a couple of essential core concepts to give you a foundation for applying the tactics that we're going to discuss as well. Every marketer's situation is different, so what I'd like to do is to give you not just best practices, but also information that's sufficiently flexible so you can apply it in your each individual scenario. And let me go on here. So first, I kind of wanted maybe a little bit sell you on LPO in the first place. And I'd like to start with a poll. Justin, if you can help me out with that. this is a question that we asked the audience in the actual study. It was one of the key questions that we asked, and I wanted to get a sense of what kind of audience we have on our webinar today. So in the benchmark survey, we had a pretty motivated audience. The reason is that survey respondents tend to be somewhat more experienced in LPO. It's kind of the reason why they responded in the first place. So this provides the benefit of using best practices from marketers who already have relatively higher level of expertise. And at the same time, it sets maybe a relatively optimistic standard for everybody else. Justin, how are we doing on the results?
We've got about 50% that have actually voted, so if we can give everyone just a few more seconds, we'd like to get your vote in as well. So here, just briefly, let me give you an idea. For those that chose 1, yes, we optimized for conversion without testing, about 23%, 24%. For number 2, yes, we optimize and run our own test to confirm the best version, about 28%, so slightly more. Now, those that do not optimize for conversion is at about 46%. So that's about finished there. That's about where we're at. So let me go ahead and close this poll, and I'll show that to the audience. Let me share that with everybody. Okay, so yeah, we're closed. About 47% are not optimizing for conversion currently.
Okay, so this is great because I think that means the information we have in the webinar today is going to be especially helpful. Let's take a look at how the survey respondents answered in the actual report. So we can see that we had only about a third of marketers that responded to the survey that were not at all involved in LPO. And of course, the information from them was useful as well because we'll use that to understand challenges and questions that marketers have. But also we have these 2/3 of marketers that were actually involved in LPO, either using just best practices or using testing. What's also interesting is that 31% of marketers, these 31% that were not engaged in LPO in 2010, they showed a high level of interest in the subject matter and a desire to get involved. We see that we saw that there's a long list of challenges to LPO. We're discussing that in the report. We're going to bring them up here in a minute. So if you're in that category and you're in this webinar in that 47%, you shouldn't feel bad because nobody ever said that LPO is easy. It is, however, manageable. That's the key thing. It's manageable and delivers outsized returns when managed correctly. And if you haven't realized it yet, part of my goal today is to either sell you on LPO as a category, as a marketing function, or if you are already sold, and many of you probably are, to give you some ammunition to help sell your boss on it as well. And I know from experience working with marketers in different organizations, especially in large organizations, this can be a challenge because you have all kinds of different priorities that you have to address, and being able to make a case for LPO is kind of half the battle. So we saw that 31% of marketers in the survey were not engaged in LPO. On this webinar, it's about half. What's interesting is that of those people who were not engaged in it in 2010, pretty much 2 to 1, 60 to 70% said that they are going to engage in LPO in this year. And on top of that, we see that even higher percentage of marketers said that of those who were engaged in LPO in 2010, they said that in 2011, as many as 86%, depending on the sales channel, said that they're going to add testing to their LPO arsenal. So that means, what does this mean? What is luring these marketers towards LPO? Why is it so important to them? And we see that it's probably the outsized returns that marketers are getting. And we ask marketers what is the kind of the average level of return that you're getting from LPO. And it's very interesting. We see here, and of course these are very aggregate averages. So some marketers are getting much higher numbers. But we can see that 7%, they're getting over 20% improvement in their annual revenue through LPO. That's very impressive, and it's kind of inspiring that you can achieve these kinds of results. Asking for revenue figures in a survey is necessarily done in terms of ranges and not exact dollar amounts, of course. So even though these figures are approximate, but the trend is very instructive. Few other types of business process improvements can boast such level of impact. You can save money by using FedEx, but it's not going to make a 20% improvement to your bottom line. And I know our marketing departments like double-digit payoffs. And even seemingly tiny conversion improvements, this 0 to 1% or 1 to 5% improvements, those can translate easily into millions of dollars for large enough enterprises. And this can be simply free money in the sense that you didn't have to spend any more media dollars on it. LPO uses traffic that's already there and just gets more value out of it. And still, of course, we see that not enough marketers, about a third of marketers, were not engaged in LPO at all. But there is, as I was saying, there's a number of challenges. There are reasons for it. So as I said, I worked for a number of years on the applied research side, so where we ran these large-scale optimization projects, and started to kind of notice these patterns in the challenges that marketers were seeing, that marketers were facing when they tried to implement optimization and testing in the first place. And they said, I want to give you some ammo here to really sell your department on the idea of LPO, and that's something that came through many responses to the survey where marketers were saying, we don't have enough, we can't make a case well enough to get LPO going in our organization, even though we know that it's important. So here's one of the sets of challenges that was covered in this year's LPO study. This chart is one way in which, by the way, we break out the data in the report. We also do it by industry, by website objective, in a couple of different ways, but I wanted to show it to you in terms of sales channels. So you have business to business, business to customer, and mixed here. So what's interesting in that the technical or purely operational challenges are often not as critical as simply prioritization of LPO over traffic generation. So the simple logic of saying, more people through the door means more sales, that seems to be the core thinking that goes on. And of course, if you have a constant conversion rate, more traffic does mean more conversions. However, it also means more bounces. It means more exits that result in zero revenue to offset the incremental cost of that visit. So it means you're constantly leaking customers, leaking money out of the sales funnel. Eventually, this constant conversion leak is going to diminish your market share. Especially this is true for B2B companies, especially companies that have a relatively small addressable market, because people who don't convert on your website, well, they do go ahead and convert somewhere else a lot of the time. Not all the time, of course. They might come back to you as well, but a lot of the time they'll just go to your competitor. How many times do you search for something and you open multiple windows in your browser and you search for something? So basically, you look for windows to close. You look for something that's as easy as possible or as appropriate as possible for what you're looking for. So these customers are going to get that product somewhere else. And what this means is that your efforts to drive more traffic only to get some predictable number of conversions can eventually drive you out of business. It's going to diminish your market share. And as marketers, it's sometimes for us difficult to see really what's left on the table. We see our pluses, we see our sales, but we're not looking at how many people we're losing in the process. And we'll already spend some money on getting them to the website in the first place. The same thing is true actually with email. A lot of the time we're concerned about how can we build our list, but we're not as concerned about how can we get the most value out of that same list or out of the list that we already have. And that goes back again to optimization. So what can we do to improve the conversion rate? There are many complicated ways of doing it, but in my experience working even with large enterprises that have already spent significant effort on optimizing their websites, there are always low-hanging fruit. There are always elements that can be optimized without making major changes to the website. And for those of you who are in the early stages of the LPO evolution, these low-hanging fruits will provide the proof of concept that you need to help you get the resources to go into a larger scale LPO program. So let me turn to some more strategic aspects of LPO, some things we discovered in our project. And I'd like to set the stage by showing you how we conceptualize LPO in the first place, this very broad view of it. In a way, it's very simple. it's about two things. It's about the website, and it's about the visitor and how they interact. It really can be boiled down to this. And the main attribute of the website is its objective. That is the ultimate outcome that you want. The main attribute of the visitor is their preferences and motivations, what they want and how badly they want it. In a minute, I'm going to show you a chart from the study that demonstrates which data marketers are using to determine these preferences and motivations. But first, let's talk about kind of the easy stuff, which is the objective. I say it's easy because it's something that you want, therefore you should probably know what it is. For larger websites especially, and in other scenarios, you of course can have more than one objective, although for a given interaction with a visitor, you should try to narrow it down hopefully to a single business outcome, whether that's generating a lead, closing a sale, getting a newsletter sign up, but it's one thing that you want the visitor to do. And that, by the way, going through that exercise can be actually challenging. But at the same time, I wouldn't even say that this is a best practice for LPO, defining the objective. It's really the practice. LPO is very much web design with an agenda, if I were to encapsulate it into one sentence. Defining the objective is critical because by doing that, after you've gone through the exercise of really explicitly defining your objective, you can then examine every single element on the page or every single part of the conversion process and do it with a simple question in hand, which is, does this element help achieve the objective? If you're making changes to a website without explicitly defining that objective, then you could be just wasting your efforts because you're not contributing to that ultimate outcome that you want. And we see it happen all the time for political or other reasons. So just out of curiosity, I wanted to see if our audience today has gone through this exercise of explicitly defining the objective on their websites. And Justin, I was going to hand this over to you to see if you can run another poll.
Yeah, let me go ahead and launch this real quick. We'll have everybody participate again. Give me just a second. All right. All right, the poll's been launched, so feel free to go ahead and answer this question. Have you defined the primary objective of your organization's website for marketing and optimization purposes? We'll give everyone just a second here, and I'll start to report on those statistics. Okay, looks like we have some numbers coming in here briefly. With about 40% in, those that are number one, we've explicitly defined it and use it tactically. We have about 30%. Number two, we know what it is but never use or talk about it, is about 25%. We never defined it officially, so opinions may differ. That's about 35%. So that right now is the primary leading answer. And the fourth one, this webinar is the first time the idea has come up. That's only about 10%. So the idea is definitely there.
That's good.
But as you can see, Boris, from some of these results, now I'm going to go ahead and close it. It looks like the opinions are varying. That seems to be the primary idea there.
So I guess it's kind of good that we only have 10% that haven't really considered this at all. And it's really, really encouraging, actually, that we have almost 30% who have defined it explicitly and know exactly what it is. And, of course, when there's no agreement or it's kind of implicit and people are going in different directions, that's when you have really conflicting objectives between different stakeholders in the organization. And so that's where you get this disagreement. We should do this on the page or we should do that. And you can't even have that conversation until you align first on the objective you're trying to achieve. This is, by the way, a little bit outside of the scope of this webinar, but operationally speaking, setting the objective is essential because it allows you to prioritize optimization opportunities. You can probably, anyone on this call, or almost anyone on this call, can probably list off the top of their head 5 to 10 things they'd like to optimize or improve on their website. And the way you prioritize is the things that contribute to your objective the most are the ones that should be prioritized, should be optimized first. They should be at the top of that list. And this probably sounds obvious and kind of simplistic, but again, just speaking from experience, very advanced marketers that we've worked with, it seems just the battles that we have to fight every day, that marketers have, the challenges that marketers have to deal with, these challenges can overshadow the big picture with respect to the website. And so we start making changes because a current ad campaign requires it, or the customer feedback that came up, and we get pulled in different directions. And all those things are important. I don't want to say, ignore the ad campaigns or ignore your customers. But those things need to be considered with respect to this question: what is the objective? And so the most difficult part of understanding people's preferences is moving beyond that and understanding people's preferences and motivations. Defining the objective is something you can do by just kind of dedicating literally an hour of your time, and well, depending on the size of your organization and the different things that your website does, and you can kind of in a pretty short order come up with what the objectives are. And of course, it doesn't have to be set in stone. Through optimization and testing, you might find that you need to redefine your objective slightly. But the key thing really is to be able to define those objectives as explicitly as possible. And we spent quite a bit of time in the benchmark report on this. I don't want to take away from the topic of this webinar, but it also goes to your definition of conversion and what it means, that what you count as successes on your website. But let's move on to the next part of the core strategy, and that's kind of the more difficult part, which is to understand what do your customers want. What are their preferences and motivations? And fundamentally, getting a human being to behave in your website in a certain way, that's what we're targeting, right? We want them to subscribe, buy, turn in a request for proposal, request for a sales call, and so on. Doing all these things, getting them to act in a particular way, requires the right, pulling the right psychological levers, setting off the right psychological triggers. In LPO, this means communicating the offer in a way that matches the visitor's preferences and motivations. It's kind of like in a good restaurant, the waiter will not just wait for you to point to an item on the menu and just pass that information to the kitchen. He or she will ask you questions to help you choose the right thing, and then also use that information to help the chef prepare a meal that will be most enjoyable, right? And specifically most enjoyable for you. So on the website, we need to be doing essentially the same thing. As a sneak peek, I didn't realize it's already transitioned. As a sneak peek, I wanted to show you a study, part of the study that shows the best kind of information that you can use to create that kind of relevant experience for your website visitors. And it's really information about the visitor's past transactions with your website. As you can see on the chart, it's both the more difficult type of data that you can use, but it's also the most effective. In this chart, by the way, just the way you read it is the type of visitor data is easier to utilize as you go up on the vertical axis, and it's more effective as you move to the right on the horizontal axis. So why is this data so effective? You see here past purchase history, CRM data beyond, that's all actually beyond purchase history. It's effective because it tells you about the visitor's preferences directly, as expressed in the choices they have actually already made. This typically, having this kind of information will typically result in higher correlations. So it's the difference between knowing that visitors that arrive during business hours tend to respond well to emphasis on extended warranties, for example, and knowing that visitors that purchased extended warranties in the past respond well to offer pages that make extended warranties part of the product selection process, as opposed to a later step. So this, you by knowing exactly what the person has done, as opposed to, for example, knowing what their geographic origin is, which might correlate with their preference, and it does. Marketers are using this information. It is effective, but it's not nearly as effective as knowing what they actually have done, the choices they have already made that are reflected in their past purchase history and CRM data. So we talked about these two core aspects of LPO. That's defining the objective, that's what you want, and matching visitor preferences, which is what they want. However, giving your website visitors what they want is not necessarily enough to get that conversion. You need to give them a reason to do business specifically with you, not just in general to want the product. So let's turn now to to how we were able to identify some of the psychological levers that I was just talking about earlier. So you see this chart. In the study, we looked at different pages marketers optimized as well as different page elements. But this chart is actually based on slightly different data. It's based on 19 specific optimization tactics that marketers were using outside of different pages or specific page elements. And I know I've been throwing a lot of charts on the screen, but before you think it's generosity, I do have to acknowledge that there's probably well over 200 charts to choose from. I think 190 some in the report. But this chart is probably the single most valuable one in the webinar. What this chart does is it aggregates the different tactics marketers used into these 4 categories. And the percentages you see are really, they just indicate the relative usage of the type of tactics in 2010. And I wanted to focus on one category today, that is establishing credibility. It's related to communicating value, but I want to make sure that it's clear that they're not the same thing. So you can have a valuable offer, but for example, it can sound too good to be true. Or more often, simply if you are not an established brand, if you're not a household name, even if the offer is realistic, the company itself may not appear to be credible. And even, on the other hand, highly recognizable brands can find themselves creating website experiences that don't take advantage of that brand value, that brand image. And I believe Carlos is going to have an example of this later on in his slides. In fact, now it has been pretty well established in social psychology. And by the way, those of you who are Robert Cialdini fans certainly know this well, that the best way to establish credibility is to have a third party attest to it for you. In fact, it was great to have Justin introduce us on this webinar as opposed to Carlos and I talking about ourselves, although I think I did talk about myself quite a bit at the beginning. But coming back to the data, so since we don't have a whole hour, we're going to focus on just one of these 19 tactics. And that's actually why we have Carlos here, to shed some light on how marketers use certain credibility tactics that he's familiar with. And in fact, he'll have another case study, aside from the one I'm going to show you, yet another case study to share with you on this topic. But I wanted to focus on this one of the 19 tactics, and that is the use of security and accreditation seals. 61% of marketers are getting a positive result with these tactics. So what does that mean? This suggests that there's definitely value in doing this. But at the same time, why are the 37% we see here are not seeing a difference? They said that using those made no difference. So this really goes back to the methodology that we're using here. The benchmark report provides you with a directional standpoint. And this is why I wanted to spend some time up to now, really, giving you some of the core strategies to inform how you're going to apply individual tactics. For your specific website, you will need to take into account your objective. You need to go through the exercise of defining your objective, and as much as you know about your visitors' preferences and motivations. And we'll talk more about it in the report, but there are different ways of teasing the data out of your analytics. And of course, you can always turn to more traditional ways of learning about your customers, so they're not as concrete, and that's, of course, doing surveys and so on. So what you need to do is take into account your objective, your visitor preferences, and then also select the appropriate credibility indicators that fit the objective and the preferences. So just saying that you need to use security or accreditation seals is not enough to say that a particular credibility indicator is going to work for your site. Ultimately, you need to test to determine the exact ones, as well to determine the exact ones you should use, as well as their placement on the site. So it's not just having an accreditation seal. It's really also about where you're going to put it. So now I want to turn to some hands-on testing examples to really applied research, and that's my background, actual tests that marketers have performed to see how they can make credibility work for them. And I'm going to use an example from a MarketingExperiments case study, since really MarketingExperiments has tested this tactic quite extensively. Before I jump into the actual example, let me set the stage as far as the methodology that goes into it. MarketingExperiments offers training on this, so I'm probably compressing maybe an hour or so of material into 3 slides, so bear with me, but I hope this makes sense. So, and it should be pretty straightforward. The concept of anxiety refers to the negative emotional forces created by lack of credibility or uncertainty about things like the safety of the transaction or other concerns that website visitors may have on your website. Because of the multitude of things that can cause visitor anxiety, your job is to overcorrect for it. For example, you can't just state somewhere in the terms of service in the fine print that you don't sell email addresses, right? That's something that has to be front and center. Marketers already know that. You can't just do it. You have to really sell that idea. So what you see on the screen are 3 kind of key considerations, 3 tactics for reducing visitor anxiety. And they're specificity, proximity, and intensity. And of course, intensity is pretty straightforward. You need to make sure that you alleviate anxiety both with respect to its substance, so that's, we don't sell the email address, don't do it, and the perception, so making it kind of painfully obvious you do not sell email addresses. Put it in a big font. Make it very clear. Proximity is also pretty straightforward. It's the idea that the visitor needs to see these credibility elements pretty much at the same time and place where they matter. So if it's something that has to do with the safety of a credit card transaction, the credibility indicator has to be next to the form field where the user is supposed to enter their credit card number, because that's when they're wondering exactly that. At that point is when they're wondering, okay, is this transaction going to be secure? Going to give up my credit card number to a suspicious company. Now let me give you a little bit more about specificity. That probably is a little bit more actionable point in terms of the different things that you can do from the perspective of specificity. Proximity and intensity are kind of more mechanical. Specificity has to do with the subject, with really the substance of your offer. It means that you need to understand your visitors' concerns to counteract them as directly as possible. So on this slide, you can see several examples of, and these examples, by the way, are very, of course, super direct. And sometimes you may have to be a little bit more subtle. For example, you may not be able to guarantee the lowest price, but what you can do is provide very clear reasons how the price is determined. And that will assure the visitor that the value that they're getting for that price is commensurate. In fact, if you can do this well enough, that will keep that visitor from going out and shopping for different prices, or at least it will keep them from simply shopping by price. And of course, as always, if you can get a third party to say all these things about you, it will sound more credible. So customer testimonials are one example of third-party endorsement, and you can use them very strategically by picking testimonials that are specific to the type of concern the visitor may have. For example, if the concern is about product quality, don't dilute your credibility indicators by including a testimonial that's about fast shipping. You need to be as specific as possible, so always keep the objective in mind. This is where we come back to the idea of the objective. Ask the question, will this testimonial help achieve the objective of this page? You may get all kinds of positive feedback from your customers, but not all can be used as testimonials, at least not effectively. Some of that positive feedback may be too generic. So you have to ask yourself, will a person reading the testimonial just think, hey, that's neat, or will it answer some of the questions in that person's mind to actually increase the probability of them converting, buying, or subscribing, and so on? And of course, the more credible the author of the testimonial, the more credibility spills over onto your website. So if Bill Gates says your Microsoft Excel add-on works great, it's of course much better endorsement than if I say it, for example. So now let's move on to a case study, a specific case study for MarketingExperiments. I hope I provided enough of a background. And it was pretty straightforward. the objective was to increase the quantity and size of donations for a nonprofit. So, by the way, this website probably is the best example of anxiety because it's asking people to send them money in exchange for nothing tangible and nothing immediate. This makes establishing credibility absolutely critical. This page already does, by the way, a pretty good job of addressing some of the key concerns. But as I was saying, there's always room for improvement. And by the way, this page just happened to have a very signed seal. But it was just the very first case study that came up when we looked for material for this webinar. So you can see that this page already has a number of credibility indicators, like answering the question, how reputable is this organization? What happens with the money, and so on. You already have a lot of the key elements were already on the page before we got to optimize them. It's a little bit slow. There we go. So here's what we did here to optimize this page. In the top opening paragraphs, we shifted the focus from the more purely factual information about the organization to really personal stories about how the donations are helping specific people. We made it as specific as possible. You can really tell where this money is going. This not only gave the page a more personal and emotional aspect, but it directly answered the question, does my contribution make a real difference? And we put the answers directly on the page. Also, what we did is we added a very personal and powerful statement from the organization's founder. And he gave the reasons why this nonprofit was created in the first place. This, again, that gave visitors more insights into the core values of this organization. And another thing that we did, and again, it's kind of very mechanical aspect, but we moved the credibility indicators that were kind of on the side. We moved them directly close in the proximity of the call to action. And here, let's take a look at these pages side by side. I don't know if anybody cares to place some side bets on the conversion rate difference, but let me show what it came out to be. And these changes, which were, you might say, were very slight, but we can see how adding a degree of credibility, both in terms of substance and in terms of putting these credibility indicators right into the right places on the page, resulted in a very significant conversion rate increase. So that's all for my part of the presentation. I'm going to hand this webinar over to Carlos, and he will talk more about a topic he is an expert on, and that is establishing trust on your website.
Carlos, are you with us?
Sorry, can you guys hear me?
Oh, yeah, we can hear you fine.
Thank you. I mixed up the buttons here. And thank you, Boris. Great presentation. I love seeing some of the stats that you've got there. I love some of the imagery, especially that leaking hose, because I tend to think that that as a landing page optimization, that's what it feels like sometimes. If you've done this a lot before, is you're driving traffic to your site, and the conversion rates aren't up to snuff, and it feels like a leaking hose, like all this traffic you're driving in isn't performing for you. So I will focus on trust, building trust for these landing pages and websites to some degree. I saw there's a question in there around the VeriSign seal and such, and I will try to address that at the right time during this presentation. But let me go through this a little bit and talk about trust. And in this case, you know, I stepping back as a marketer and think about all the marketing dollars you're spending today, right? You're spending lots of money on Google AdWords, banners, whatever, email traffic, et cetera, to drive traffic to that landing page, to get somebody to do something, right? And it comes down to it, it's all about trust. And the reason I've got these two images there is because these two guys, now that you see the names, are, you know, originally they just look like trustworthy people, right? They look like, you know, respectable businessmen But at the end of the day, one guy is, the guy on the left, Bernie Madoff, is, as you know, one of the biggest con artists in history. And the other guy is Warren Buffett, one of the richest men in history, And they look the same. And think about the way that it works on the internet. There are millions and millions of websites, and you're trying to drive traffic and spending lots of money to get them to your site to try to do something, to try to take action, to try to spend money. And are you trusted at that point, right? Amongst all the millions, unless you're Amazon or unless you're Apple, unless you've got that name brand reputation, this is what you need to do, in my opinion, where you're trying to get people to pull the trigger. This is where your hard-earned dollars are, where 1% or even 0.5% increase in your landing page optimization is going to make a difference. Now here I've got two examples. I use my own examples from what I've struggled with internally here in promoting my products, right? So when you're taking your landing pages, are you taking people to a primary domain? That is, are you taking them to yourdomain.com / and here's my landing page? But in my example here, I've had to take people to an external domain because Symantec, we're a big infrastructure. I don't necessarily as a marketer get to drive or get all my wishes done for the IT. So here I've got this domain that I had to externally create. It's externally hosted, VeriSignTrustSurvey.com. It's all about building trust at the survey, et cetera, et cetera. But how could I get people to trust this site if I'm driving people to this website? And I wonder out there in the audience whether or not are you driving them directly to your domain, and is that domain trusted? Is it a name brand? Or sometimes you have to take them to an external site. It's externally hosted. How do you know that that's a trusted site? Anybody, as you know, anybody can set up a domain very quickly, very easily, within 24 hours and make it look pretty real. So if you are using an external domain, try to reduce that domain anxiety. If you're capturing information, I would argue you definitely want to secure it with SSL, HTTPS. We're known very well. VeriSign is known very well. This is sort of our bread and butter. But also, it's important not only to show a trust mark, but our trust mark in particular is a dynamic trust mark. I mean, that is, you click on it, it goes to our servers, it displays information about you. It displays information about saying, guess what, this data is encrypted, it's done by VeriSign, a third-party, well-known authority that people know and trust. The identity has been verified. There's a vetting process that occurs. And then we also do a malware scan, daily malware scan to protect you. Now, we're not the only ones that do this. Go shop around. I actually encourage that. That's fine. I have a high degree of confidence in our product. But you don't want to just slap on any seal. All right? You want credibility because that's what your customers are going to be asking for. So this is a little bit more relevant from recent events, the tragic events over in Japan with the earthquake and tsunami. And guess what people do? Guess what nefarious people do? They start spamming and setting up websites to donate money, right? I like that example that Boris was showing earlier about donating money. A lot of people can set up a website very quickly saying, hey, and send you a lot of spam and say, hey, give me money, we're going to give a relief money to here. How do you know this site can be trusted, right? And that's the challenge as you as a marketer in optimizing either your website or your landing page have to do. A good case example.
Carl, sorry to interrupt you real quick. The key thing to understand these are great examples that we are providing here, but it doesn't have to be that egregious. And any website, a visitor who shows up has these reservations that may be a lot more subtle, but you still have to overcome them.
Absolutely. Especially the smaller you are or less known you are, you really have to work twice as hard as the next guy because they have to trust you.
Absolutely.
And look at this example that I have here. It's I'm a Wells Fargo customer. This is what happened to me in 2010. They sent me an email that came from WF.com. WF.com is Wells Fargo, but I didn't know it was Wells Fargo's, and they were promoting their mobile banking at the time. I had no idea if they were WF. So I clicked on it. I looked at the site, and again I look at WF.com, and it says Wells Fargo, but I can cut and paste images like that as well. So I was trying to figure out if they were a real site. Now then I took the next steps. And then I said, okay, I looked at this SSL certificate that they have. They're using a standard SSL. They're using the VeriSign SSL, which is fine. There's still not enough information there to tell me because they're not using EDSSL, which is something called Extended Validation SSL, which is sort of like the Uber SSL where you have to, there's a standard, there's an open standard about validating users that can use EDSSL. And then I went in and hopped into whois.net and figured out who the owner of the website, and then finally I figured out, okay, it is Wells Fargo that's doing this. That being said, I would argue that 99.9% of the audiences that you're talking to, marketing, don't know how to do this. They're not going to be technically savvy. My dad's not going to know. My mom certainly is not going to know how to do this, and they may or may not trust this site. Or maybe they'll just they may click on it, and they're likely to get at some point get phished by a nefarious individual.
Oh, that's a great point, Carlos. Actually, that's the difference between the substance and the perception. We always talk about, yes, make sure that the substance is there. You are a trusted site, but make sure that you actually, the person who is looking at the site sees that immediately and understands it at a glance.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is sort of a real world versus internet world example that familiarity reduces anxiety. I don't travel a whole lot, but I find I find that when I do travel, and I don't speak the language necessarily, but I find familiar elements to give me reduce my anxiety. I don't go to McDonald's a lot or anything like that, or maybe probably go more to Starbucks or anything like that. But when I see a location like McDonald's, something that I recognize from home, or Starbucks, etc., I feel a little bit more comfortable because I go, okay, I'm not in a bad area. Usually these big companies do their demographics and make sure that you're in a good area, and then I feel more comfortable because it's something that I've seen, noted at home. In that same way, on an unknown internet website, you want to give markers that people are familiar with. Our markers, people are very familiar with the VeriSign seal. In this image, actually, I have in the upper, hopefully you can see this in the upper right-hand corner, there's a bunch of other markers. There's the Better Business Bureau there, McAfee's there, there's a chat session. McAfee's a competitor for us. That's fine. If some websites like to go with what we call the NASCAR effect, which is the more seals, the better. Other websites like to keep the view cleaner and just selectively choose top brands to represent the trust. Let's see, my volume is okay. So anyway, again, reducing anxiety. Put up some reputable and familiar markers that can help people feel at ease with your website, since you're likely, unless you're a big brand, not known. And this just drills down a little bit to this one of our customers, My Binding. You can go see it now because I just pulled it yesterday. It's not an old site. MyBinding.com. They put up our seals, and they want people to click on it and make sure that identity has been verified. That's very critical because the example I was talking about, nefarious websites, is our vetting process for authentication is not easy. Actually, we have a pretty decent dropout rate because people don't qualify. And then, of course, we offer this malware scan.
One quick question for you. We had something just come in. If you'll go back to that last slide about your sign when you click on it, is there any particular reason why the background is red? Kind of, I don't know, it kind of stands out to me as something that would be wrong, like an error. Have you done any testing on that, or why, you use red as that background?
That would be legacy. We want people to be eye-catching for them, for sure.
Okay.
But it's more legacy. This has been around. We've been around for 15 years plus, and the VeriSign SSL has been around. With the seal, it's just legacy at this point. Now that we're part of Symantec, I'm sure there'll be a redesign for it. So there was no specific reason that I'm aware of. But
okay. Appreciate it.
Sure, no problem. And at the end of the day, you want to convey legitimacy. The example again. With the Japan earthquake and tsunami, you don't want to look like a phishing site. Anything that you can do, especially when you're doing landing pages, because you're driving Google traffic or whatever to those landing pages, anything you can do to make those landing pages more legitimate. It could be the seal, it could be anything else that you can think of, good designs, good focus, get away from things like typos and things like that, because I've noticed, or we know statistically, that a lot of the phishing sites tend to have spelling issues, because it's usually from a foreign country and the English isn't quite as good or as proper. Those are markers that you can see for a phishing site. And there's 2 links down there. One's from anyphishing.org if you're interested in this topic. It's a nonprofit that does this, and we also have this Fish No Fish fun little game that we show that helps you kind of understand what phishing is all about. So, case study. I know Marketing Sherpa people love case studies. I'm a big fan of Marketing Sherpa because of this. This is on our website. The link's below. It's minaenergysolutions.com. And this is an interesting website because they're non-e-commerce. That is, VeriSign is primarily known for e-commerce, securing transactions and encryptions, etc. But My Energy Solutions doesn't do that. All they're doing is trying to capture leads through registration. It could be for a newsletter or to sign up for in this case an energy audit is what they're doing. And they did and these guys did an A/B split test with our seal before and after. Not before and after, sorry, an A/B split test side by side at the same time, so that you eliminate the timing variable out of this. And they were now. This is their screenshot from their measurements. We didn't help them. The guys that work here are apparently pretty technical, so they understood how to do an A/B split test, and they were able to see an increase in registrations by 137% and revenue 75%. Granted, here you shouldn't expect to you should be skeptical as a marketer. You should be skeptical. I'm not going to promise you're going to get these kind of results, and I've seen them. And from talking to customers, I've seen them across the range, right? Some people, quite frankly, may not see results. They may see like 0. And there's so many variables involved here. Are they actually getting a lot of traffic, or are their expectations a little bit high because they just put up a website? The whole Field of Dreams, right? If you remember that movie, if you're old enough to remember that movie, if you build it, they will come. That doesn't happen on the internet. It just doesn't, unless you get really lucky. You have to drive traffic, and maybe they didn't see results because their offer wasn't as compelling. They are not getting enough traffic, etc. But some sites that do generate a lot of traffic, I'm pretty confident. That we have a ton of case studies that show these sort of results. I'm pretty confident that the seal ought to help. I mean, I can't guarantee it, of course, but I would ask actually to simply do this. I mean, just test on these things, and then look at it from a customer's perspective. What do your customers expect? Go look at your peers. Go look at your competitors. Go look at the sites that you trust. Right? Go look at the sites that the big players use. Right? What does Amazon do? What do the big banks do? But really, what you want to compare yourself to are your competitors and your peers. Right? They've done a lot of the homework. That's what I love about the internet. I mean, you can just go see what other people have done to optimize their sites, their landing pages, etc. Go look at, go click on a few ads from folks you respect. It could be the Intuits of the world. Intuit focuses on small businesses, for example. They do great advertising. Go look at the way they've optimized their sites. There's no shame in copying good work, in my mind. So, and then final comments, and I kind of said this before, is test. I mean, you should look at anything that I've said very skeptically. I mean, is this seal really going to work? Maybe. I mean, I hope it does. I mean, I like to think that the product that I'm marketing is genuinely going to help people improve their websites. And if you can do this, measure with analytics. There's a lot of free analytic tools. Google Analytics is very popular. And test it a little, the whole freemium movement. Test it for free, right? Our products offered it with a 60-day free trial. That's a fairly long trial. You can put the seal up on your website, assuming that you have passed our authentication. You can put the seal on the website where your call to actions are, where where you want people to sign up, or you want people to pay money, those kind of things, for 60 days and see if it has made a difference. I encourage you to run Google Analytics or something like that. Run an A/B split test if you're sophisticated enough to do that. At the end of the day, it's going to come down to your website. It's a unique experience per. But we know from our customers, and we have hundreds of thousands of customers, quite frankly, that use our product. So we've got the numbers to back it up. We don't, we don't publish all our customer lists or anything like that, but I'm pretty confident with the VeriSign seal in this case.
Yeah, it was great to see a number of case studies on your site, which is, I'm glad you pulled out one of these that actually has an A/B split test, which is great to see.
Great, Justin.
All right. Well, thank you, Carlos, and we appreciate that that content on trust and how important that is. And Boris, you went over quite a bit about the guarantees and the seals with the case study that you had. That's all great content. I think that each one of us need to apply. I'd like to go ahead now at this point and just let everybody know that all of our audience here is available to buy the 2011 landing page optimization benchmark report, where Boris is the lead author of. And they can do that at a special discount today. So check out that link below. Now, as you can imagine, on a topic like this, we have quite a few questions to get to. So I'd like to, just with the few remaining minutes that we have, answer some of those questions and give you some feedback. Carlos, we'll start with you. One of the things, we got a question earlier. It says, I noticed that the case study you presented on the website doesn't use that SSL. And he said, I thought the VeriSign seal was only for e-commerce. Are you saying I can buy this seal for my site even if I don't need the SSL? Can you still get the VeriSign seal?
That's right. That's true. We're known for SSL and encryption and e-commerce, etc. But last year is when we launched a product that is for non-SSL websites or sites that don't, or informational sites, for example, to try to engage people to build trust, because authentication is such a strong component of what we offer, as well as sites that use third-party e-commerce shopping carts. They don't exactly host the SSL, but they may use PayPal or something like that. They normally would not be able to post a seal because they don't own the SSL cert. Now they can buy the VeriSign Trust Seal, or at least in this case, do a trial, a free trial for 60 days. I saw one question, somebody, is it Jan, that asked a question about the VeriSign green address bar. That's actually EV-SSL. It's a standard. It's not specific necessarily to VeriSign, but we are the leader in that particular space for EV-SSL. It's what I referred to earlier as the Uber SSL. And I saw earlier, I remember there was a question around any stats that I can sort of prove that VeriSign will make a difference for your website. We run stats all the time, but it's internally to make sure that that there are no issues with specific customers or whatnot. But it's going to come down to you. It's the specific. If I can give you a bunch of stats that are going to say, oh, 11% of people drop out because they don't see VeriSign seal, and we've had that stat. But I would encourage you, since we have a free trial, to just go ahead and try it. I mean, it's because I can give you a stat and it may not match you. That's how I would encourage that.
Okay. Appreciate that, Carlos. Now, Boris, we have a question for you. It says, you showed us a case study that used testing to determine the right way for credibility indicators. What does the benchmark report say about the value of testing? Can you go into a little bit into that?
Sure. I think we have about 1 minute left, so I'll make this quick. There's a whole big section on testing in the report, and we looked at how marketers are using testing to generate a positive return. And again, this goes to this idea of how do you sell your boss, and the need to test, and the need to invest into the expertise, into the tools that you will need, and of course the resources and time that you will need to spend on testing, because it does take time, it does take resources, but the results are again outstanding. We saw that even among all marketers across the board, twice as many report achieving a positive ROI with testing than without. And this is the difference is basically of marketers that have been able to calculate the ROI. That's a whole separate topic because it's can be difficult to calculate. But of those that have, twice as many report a positive ROI when they test than when they do not. So the returns from testing are definitely very high. It is an expertise-intensive field. You do have to be prepared for it, and I hope that marketers who do read the report can learn something from it to take it back and get started in testing.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Boris, and also thanks, Carlos. We appreciate all that insight. What I'd like to do is, again, remind everybody that the slide presentations will be sent to everyone and a follow-up email tomorrow. Continue to carry the conversation or questions you have through the Sherpa webinar hashtag. And again, just thank you again to all the speakers for sharing their marketing insights and expert with us today. All right, we'll take care. We'll talk to you later. Thank you. Bye-bye.